Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. Good to be back taking a trip down memory lane today.
It would seem so, and it's been 22 years since the wonderful operating system known as Windows 95 hit the shelves. It was this time last month, so a couple of weeks ago actually, in 1995, that it replaced what was then popular Windows 3.1 and basically went around. It was I don't know if revolution's really the right word for it, but it definitely pushed things in a certain direction away from, I guess, the DOS-based systems that a lot of people were using. Obviously, the Mac lovers will probably, balk at that because they had the graphical user interface for a lot earlier than what Windows did, and Steve Jobs famously said that they stole the whole idea. Bill Gates stole the whole idea, but I guess from my memory of it, I remember that obviously my first forays into PCs were with Windows 3.1 in particular, and then 3.11, as I recall, was a slightly different version. But it, I don't know if you remember this, but you still had to boot into DOS first, and
yeah.
I mean, you could set up an automation that would then boot into Windows, but when you were setting the computer up, it actually was manual. Like Windows didn't start the computer, which I think for most people today, either they wouldn't remember that or they'd probably find that incredible, really.
Well, yeah, I just find the whole thing incredible because I had already spent a lot of time on Macs by the time I came across this DOS operating system 3.11, which actually I didn't mind too much, to be honest. And I think if there was any great step of Windows 95, it was probably the fact that it was the first mouse-driven interface for I guess, DOS-based machines.
Yeah.
Before that, 3.11, of course, as you know, had a lot of keyboard shortcuts, which they'd built in because that was the latest technology all the way through to the mid-90s. So, yeah. But I remember the fuss being made about Windows 95, with the Rolling Stones Start Me Up.
Yes.
And, I was looking at this as a Mac user at the time wondering, what is this? What is this, Windows 95? It looks amazing. And quite, I don't know if it's ironic or not, at the same time IBM launched Warp OS 2, which was their own, I guess, graphical user interface or mouse-driven. And both the ads, well, you had Start Me Up for the Rolling Stones, but the IBM one was much more skater, kids, crazy, all these things you'd be able to do. And I remember watching the ads thinking, my God, what is this? I'm going to have to throw my Mac away and move to a Windows machine because these things are amazing. And then I saw that they were just rip-offs of the Mac system that crashed all the time anyway. So that's my memories of Windows 95.
The irony for me, I think, was that I used, before Windows 95, I guess, and partially while Windows 95 was, because you still had the DOS system available to you. Windows 3.1, I typically used just to be able to use Office mainly, which I find ironic. And then I would, you used to have all these crazy things like menu software that you could, that could run on DOS that you could set up exactly the way you wanted to, so you could run other bits of software that you didn't have to run under Windows, because back then if you ran it under Windows, the computer probably couldn't handle it because it was too much resourcing.
On your 356.
Yeah. And then, so what I ended up doing, I ended up getting Windows 95, but I didn't get it, as I recall, I didn't really get it until towards the end of its run. So I had it for about 6 months, and then Windows 98 came out, and I just went straight to that afterwards, which, I mean, it was still pretty much the same thing, just with less bugs, shall we say. And as you remember, my first non-linear editor was based on Windows 98 back in the good old days, and I was amazed that it didn't crash as much as it did. But
you have to admit your hardware was purpose built for that particular task. What you didn't just get an off-the-shelf machine running 98.
Yeah, that is true. That is true, and I think that's important to point out in today's day and age, because I don't think you would really actually think about that today. The modern operating systems, whether they're Windows, Mac, or even the ones on the phones, iOS, Android, whatever, they work so well with the hardware that you actually don't even really think about the fact that the software could be temperamental with the hardware. And just as your point was just then about the fact that it was purpose built, I can recall getting that computer from the video solution expert I got it from, who basically said, do not under any circumstances install anything else on this computer because it could, make it fall over. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Because that's how computers were back then. They were, they used to be, Macs were a little bit different, but
that's right.
The Windows experience always led to frustrations with crashes and registry problems and whatever else, which have been for the most part smoothed out in the 2 decades since then. I wanted to touch on too this hilarious video that I came across of teens reacting to Windows 95, and where essentially they plunked these teenagers in front of a good old-fashioned Windows 95 beige box computer and tried to get them to use it, and they were having a bit of trouble figuring it out. And that whole video, I mean, it's hilarious to watch, obviously, but
wasn't that exactly how it was 22 years ago anyway?
Yeah, nobody could figure it out.
Except it was parents sitting there going, what's going on?
But I was like feeling the nostalgia, because that whole boot cycle process, obviously I remember that quite clearly. It would take a few minutes before you could be up and running, but that was amazing still anyway. Like, that was actually quick, back then, as far as all that's concerned. And even that quaint little message at the end where it says it's now safe to turn off your computer. And I used to remember that, because the IT guys at work would say, if you don't, you got to wait for that screen, because if you hit the power button, you could end up screwing up Windows.
Well, that's right.
And as one of the teenagers said in that video, why would it not be safe to turn off the computer at this point? Do you think maybe today's generation might have benefited from knowing or experiencing what we went through? Do you think?
Maybe not. It's really hard to say. I mean, the thing that I find interesting is that, if you look at the usual paradigm of experience, experience makes you a better person. Maybe for you and me, it gives us some advantage, but I tend to think now the experiences I had with computers, 20 years ago, doesn't give me any advantage at all today.
No.
So I guess the short answer would be no. Do I have an appreciation for how difficult it used to be or how far we've come? Yes, I do. That's a good thing. But I don't think anymore anything you knew because you went through what we went through gives you any advantage in using a smartphone today, or even just working with the latest Mac operating system.
Well, I was actually just thinking that I actually find that because everything works so well these days, I'm not thinking about how it works now, and I think that's something that I guess today's generation, thankfully they've been able to bypass that particular thing. But for me, I remember that there was a portion of my time when I used these computers back then that was devoted to figuring out why it wasn't working the way it should be, or even having an interest in tinkering with settings and all of that sort of thing, which you just don't really do anymore because it isn't necessary. You could tweak settings back then to improve performance in a particular area, but because now it's just across the board, everything just works, and it works really smoothly, there's no point. And I actually while I do remember being interested in that sort of thing back then, I've zero interest in it now. I just want to be able to get on and just get stuff done. And I'm just glad we're at that point.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it's a very different environment now. And I think if you give it another 5 years, probably even what, kids today know will be different again. And I think we're heading the way of voice commands. We're heading away really into the post-PC era, which I think just means not so much that the devices won't be, laptops or tablets or phones, but I think the post-PC era really means that the way we interact with them will be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, Steve, and I think that'll be good. I mean, we'll probably be talking about Apple's latest offerings that will be next week, so it'll be good to compare and contrast, especially compared to what we were talking about today. Alrighty, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there, and you can subscribe to all our channels. We're on YouTube and blogs and Vimeo and all sorts of things. So hopefully you'll be able to check it out and enjoy all of our back catalogue. We'd greatly appreciate that. Alright, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.